Hey guys, my name is Ryan. I'm one of the tutors in the Econ Tutoring Center. Today I'm going to be talking with you, or going through another example about tariffs and quotas when countries are engaged in free trade. Remember that notation and language may vary by professors, so always confirm that the language I'm using is the same as your instructors. Okay, so let's say that this country here is engaged in, well, first of all, note that if they weren't engaged in free trade at all, they'd be at P3 and Q3. That's where their domestic supply equals their domestic demand. But let's say that they are engaged in free trade and that the world price is P1, right? So at P1, the imports are going to be the quantity demanded at that, which is right here at Q5, minus the quantity supplied there, how much domestic suppliers are willing to supply at that price, which is Q1. So we have Q5 minus Q1 is the amount imported if this country is engaged in free trade at P1. Let's say now, though, that domestic suppliers somehow lobby or something, and the country imposes a tariff of P2 minus P1. So we're going to be shifting up with a tax of this height. So then what will be the imports? Well, if we move up to P2, we just go to where quantity demanded and subtract that from, subtract quantity supplied. So Q4 minus Q2 is now how many are being imported. At that price, domestic suppliers want to supply this much, but domestic consumers want Q4. So the only way they're going to get that much is if they get it imported from somewhere. So now we can maybe analyze what the consumer and producer surplus change was to that and find out what the deadweight loss was. Okay, so remember that, well, let's say before they were engaged in trade at all, consumers had A, this upper triangle, and producers had B, E, J. Then when we were at P1, when they were initially engaged in free trade, producers had the area above the supply curve and below the price, which would have just been J for them. And consumers would have had this whole A, B, C, D, E, F, G, H, I. They would have had this whole big triangle here. When you add the tariff on, producers get plus E. Now let's look at what consumers get. Consumers lose E, F, G, H, and I because their triangle shifts up. So they get minus E minus F minus G minus H minus I. Right, and then the one thing we have to look at still is the tax revenue here, or the tariff revenue. So, write that here. So, remember, this is the value of our tax, P2 minus P1 on each unit. And now, for every unit that's imported, the government collects that revenue from it, that much from it. So if we're importing Q4 minus Q2, the tariff revenue is going to be Q4 minus Q2 times this P2 minus P1. So that's going to be this box here, G and H. So that's going to be plus G plus H. So the deadweight loss is whatever is left, the net loss in the economy, if there is one, from this tariff. Well, the E's are going to cancel from the producers and the consumers. So I'll just write deadweight loss here. And the E's are going to cancel. The G's and the H's cancel. So the deadweight loss is minus F minus I. Right? So these two triangles here are the deadweight loss from a tariff. Okay, so now we're going to do the same thing here for a quota. So again, let's say that we are initially engaged in free trade at P1, but now instead of the government imposing a tariff, they impose a quota of Q4 minus Q2. So that doesn't mean that they force the price to be P2, but because they're limiting the amount of imports to be that much, they're forcing quantity demanded to be here and quantity supplied to be here, and the price that matches that is P2. So we're going to have the same effect on consumers and producers, right? Producers are going to gain this E here, so they gain E. Consumers are going to lose E, F, G, H, and I. Now here's the difference. Because this wasn't a tax, because the government wasn't collecting any revenue, they were just forcing them not to be able to import a lot, there is no tariff revenue. So this doesn't mitigate some of the pain that a tariff might have. So this is going to be just 0, right? Which leaves the deadweight loss being this whole middle area here. We still have the e's cancel, but we're still going to have minus e, minus f, minus g, minus h, minus I, right? Which leaves us this whole middle trapezoid thing here being the deadweight loss. So realize again that a quota is worse for society than a tariff is. So hopefully that gave you a little bit better understanding of why quotas and tariffs are different and how they have different effects on society. If you have any other questions, be sure to talk to your instructor or come to the tutoring center.